Hey everyone, and welcome to the 2024 edition of SlaterPod. Hi Esther.
Hi Florian, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and Happy New Year to our audience. Hope it's been a good start to the year. And let's get right on with the agenda today. So we're going to take a live quick look at what was kind of a breaking story this morning. So OpenAI launched their GPT store, and we'll look into what that means potentially for translation, localization, dubbing, etc. We're going to look at the story we ran late last year, where Albania is considering using GPT for translation. You're going to tell us a bit more about Duolingo firing some translators. Then we're going to revisit what was a really poor year for listed language service providers. You're going to walk us through some of the top M&A deals in 2023. And then there was a leadership change at a leading LSP just recently. Now, for those of you who download this podcast right after it's out, or listen to it or watch it on YouTube, a couple of hours after it's out, maybe you can still join our free research briefing happening late on Friday, January 12th, late afternoon Europe, kind of early morning Pacific. So check this out, free research briefing. Lots of people have registered already. We're also going to be hosting another SlaterCon remote on Wednesday, March 20th. Great program shaping up. We also published late last year our final pro guide of 2023, media localization into English. Check that one out. And Esther, we are now collecting data for our index, right? For our language service provider index.
Yeah, that's right. So 2024 edition of the LSPI is now, open for submissions. The team has been sending out instruction emails to lots of people this week. Look out for an email in your inbox. If not this week, then next week.
So if you run an LSP and you want to be listed in the language service provider index alongside, 300-400 of your peers, do reach out. Let us know. We'll list. And it's a very useful tool for, of course, buyers, but also for investors, for people that are looking at the industry at large. So we'll be publishing this as soon as we have most of the data. Now, this morning or late last night in Europe time, OpenAI finally launched what they call their GPT store. So what is a GPT store? Well, for those of you who have played around with ChatGPT, there's now an option for basically creating your own GPT chat interface, right? You feed it with your own data. It's no code essentially. You don't need to be a developer to do this. So you can feed it with your own data. You can tweak it a little bit, and then you can actually share it. You used to be able to share it already late last year, like by a link to some people. But now you can actually launch it in the OpenAI's store and hopefully make some money. It's very early days, but it looks like these kind of creators, I wouldn't call them developer, let's call them like creators of GPTs. They get paid probably by usage. And, so if your GPT becomes a very popular one, you're probably going to make some money. I don't know.
So like a sort of YouTube channel-esque type model.
Probably like an app store, right? It's more like, maybe the best analogy, I guess, is the Apple App Store, where, maybe literally, for those of you who remember, like 15 years ago when it came out, everybody tried to get an app on the App Store. Still, of course, but of course, to develop an app, you need to be a developer, and you have a great idea, but you also need to be a developer. Now with GPTs, you don't need to be a developer. It's very kind of no code. You upload your data, you tweak it a little bit, and you launch it. So it's even more about the data you have and the idea you have. Now, for those on YouTube, we're going to do a quick screen share now. And for those that are listening, just, keep listening. We're trying to make this useful.
Use your imagination.
So now we're on the App Store, and you see that you have like a list of things, the topics, DALL-E, writing. Those are the categories: productivity, research and analysis, programming, education, and lifestyle. There's nothing else there now. Those are the categories. You can see trending GPTs, the typical talk to your PDF, ask your PDF. Those are among the two. Then two are about AI research assistance for academic papers. Scholar AI. So those are some of the trending ones. So now let's go and look. There's a search box. Let's look for translation. So we're pulling up translation. You can't hit search and get a list, but you get a drop down where we have about 10 translation GPTs. It starts with something called Gemini Ultra. Apparently it has 1,000 comments. Academic translator to English, Chinese, Translate GPT, English to Indonesian informal translation is being served up here. So let's click into Gemini Ultra and see what that is. All right, running into a demo effect here. Interestingly, it's not loading, and we had the same issue before the podcast. So it looks like this is not really working that quickly yet for...
Try a different one.
I think it's a general... Oh, this one seems to be popping up. Nope, also loading. Well, all right, so we stopped sharing the screen. Looks like this isn't ready for prime time just yet from the OpenAI side of things. I mean, they did launch it, just a few hours ago. So I did play around with it before, looked at like translation, localization, dubbing, subtitling. Yeah, you get those 10 options. You can go there. It's a little too early to see how useful they are actually going to be in real life, but definitely an interesting thing for anybody who's interested in these types of cheap and cheerful applications for now. You should look at this. I don't think it's going to be just yet like a major factor, maybe the next 6 months, but it is going to bring a lot of like very kind of low. Let me rephrase. The barrier to entry is basically zero now to almost any kind of language AI app. Like whether those apps end up being useful, is a totally different story. But the barrier to entry is essentially zero now. You're basically, you can take your data and your great idea and you put it on, the world's most powerful LLM. So, well, I think the idea is interesting. Let's see how it's going to fly. Quick news story that caught our attention last year, where Albania is considering using ChatGPT for translation of documents related to their EU accession bid. I mean, when you want to join the European Union, you need to translate probably millions of documents from, in this case, Albanian, which arguably is mid to low resource languages in terms of machine translation. And since the CTO of OpenAI happens to be originally from Albania, Albania's prime minister thought it was a great idea to use ChatGPT. So, and let's see if this actually is going to go ahead, right? I mean, the headline here is that the prime minister says they want to eliminate an army of translators that they would usually use, and just use AI to do this. Now, the broader point here is, and we discussed this a couple of times on previous podcasts, that OpenAI has this insane mind share now when it comes to all kind of language AI use cases, including machine translation. And so this is a bit of a threat for the incumbent, more narrow machine translation providers, because now people might just gravitate to OpenAI for everything. Another story, kind of in a similar...
Yeah, it's continuing the same theme.
Continuing the same theme is Duolingo laying off translators and other contractors. What happened there?
Yeah, well, I mean, many people be familiar with Duolingo, the language learning platform. They appear to be cutting back on their use of human translators. A couple of sort of social media-based discussions, like on Reddit, some threads discussing all about what's going on over there. But one Reddit user was saying that Duolingo basically offboarded what that person called a huge percentage of their contractors who did translations, basically explaining that the plan for Duolingo now was to rely primarily on AI, machine translation, which obviously would in theory save Duolingo money and time. But I think generally, layoffs in terms of internal layoffs on the translation team seem to be relatively small scale. The same person said it was 2 translators out of 4 on their particular team, but there have been much wider layoffs outside of the team.
So that's contractors, so like freelancers.
Yeah, I believe so. I think it seems to be mostly focused on the contractors and the how they're using contractors going forward, because it seems that now the translators that are still going to be working with for Duolingo are essentially going to be reviewing AI output or post editing potentially. And moving forward, they'll also have content curators as a sort of job title or role. These people will be checking the AI generated content, I guess source content, so that content can then be translated into multiple target languages, presumably also through machine translation. The idea being that every course, so every language, every course will have the same source content there. Interestingly, some comment there from, not original for Slater, but some comments that we saw from Duolingo spokesperson saying, we just no longer need as many people to do the type of work some of these contractors were doing. He went on to say, or the person went on to say, part of that could be attributed to AI. And then there's been a bit of, I don't know if you could call it backlash, but some reaction from Duolingo.
I think we can call it backlash.
Okay, maybe I'm being too cautious here, but yeah, some backlash from Duolingo users basically claiming that they have already seen a decline in the quality of some of the courses. They cited examples like mispronunciations or automated mispronunciations, because on the app it sort of speaks to you, so you can then mimic the language. Incorrect translations, and one person described it as unhinged crap for practice. So yeah, not holding back. Another person was saying, I'm not paying $100 a year so you can middleman me ChatGPT. So this is an interesting sort of turn of events, I think, where Duolingo's thinking, great, we can reduce our costs for translation for essentially course prep or course development. But then ultimately the users are turning around and saying, well, actually, if you're telling me that this is 90% AI, then why am I paying $100 a year for it?
I think this is a major threat for Duolingo. Sure, they have a gazillion users. I don't know, gazillion, but like 100 million users or something, like lots of installs on iPhone and Android, etc. So huge user base, the paying user base. But I think that comment is extremely interesting. I'm not paying $100 a year so you can middleman me ChatGPT. Yeah. There's probably a GPT being written right now that can help. Maybe not, of course, as smoothly and as nicely as Duolingo, but still, still does some of the trick. Now, the market cap of Duolingo is $9 billion. I just checked. So that company is super, super valuable. Very, very interesting that it hasn't taken a hit at all. In fact, like if you look at 1 year, it's actually up. It's more than doubled since the launch of ChatGPT. It's crazy. So clearly investors aren't worried about what I just said. I was worried about for Duolingo. So I guess that's a bit of a contrarian take there. Stocks more than double. Crazy. Now, a dozen stocks that didn't double.
One group of stocks
that basically halved in 2023 was LSP stocks. So the handful, roughly a dozen of the publicly traded LSPs, they're quite poorly. In fact, no single publicly traded LSP outperformed the MSCI average. So what's the MSCI average? It's like literally the broadest possible global average for stock market performance, which was up, let me check, it was up 22%. So, you invest $100 at the beginning of the year in 2023, you end up having 122 at the end of the year. If you invested in the MSCI World, the broadest possible stock average, Now, if you invested in Honyaku Center, the Japanese like incumbent LSP, you ended up with $116. If you invested in MetaReal, you earned one total dollar, so it's up 1%. But then it starts declining. So AI Media, the speech recognition company we had on the pod as well, is down to 1%.
But they actually recovered a lot, didn't they? AI Media. They were trading quite low for a lot of the year.
They were lower a bit. Star down 11, VIX Solution 35%.
Star 7, right?
Star 7, yes. RWS down 35. Keyword Suit is 40. Straker 56. So basically halved. Sue Digital 65 and Appen another 74 and keeps going down. Now let's pluck out a couple of these. So again, I mean, Honyaku is interesting in the sense that it's just so stable, but probably also very thinly traded. So, I mean, unless they have some big developments, the stocks just kind of goes sideways, treads water. AI Media, we had their CEO on the podcast. So they are now shifting to higher margin tech revenues away from services. So it looks like the strategy, especially late last year, is starting to be recognized more by the market. So stocks kind of going up a little bit. RWS went down really heavily in the beginning of 2023 when people, were worried about a lot of the big tech clients cutting budgets. But then since it's kind of stabilized actually since April, except in October, they gave a trading update. Then the stock tanked 30%, 40% in one day. But then really came back very quickly. I think a lot of people realized that it was oversold in October. So now it's stabilized and coming back a bit.
Down by a third overall.
Down by a third overall. But yeah, basically flat since April. So, there's no no downward momentum there anymore. Unlike with Appen, that just keeps going down. It's worrying. I mean, this company might go, well, let's see. It's almost 99, 98% or so from the peak. It's down. It's now worth $100 million, maybe less, $80 million. So, maybe somebody who's really adventurous can come in and acquire the company. I think they're up for sale. We spoke about it last time. Now, it's counterintuitive. If you're in data for AI, how can you be struggling so much? I think they're just in the wrong piece of business for data for AI. But if they can make a successful pivot into the type of data that these large language models need, much more kind of highly curated, super structured, highly annotated data, that could be a major turnaround story for 2024. So, again, good luck to the newish CEO in turning that ship around. Now, the one loser in 2023 also was Zoo Digital, but for no fault of their own. It's just that, if your clients go on strike, it's kind of hard for you to make money. So now that all the actors and the writers are back in studios and offices, I expect a good year for them. Content keeps flowing. Netflix has new shows, etc. So, and we all know that this is a vertical it's being impacted by AI, but it's one of the harder ones to disrupt for these kind of feature films or major high budget productions. Now, what we also tracked, of course, M&A in 2023, and we're going to be publishing our annual summary soon. But what were some of the key deals in 2023? Maybe top 5?
Yeah, we plucked out 5 of the most impactful M&A deals of 2023 in an editorial piece just over Christmas. So some of the ones we selected were EVA, so Visual Data's acquisition of EVA, which is formerly known as Eclair. Again, this is in the media localization space, with Visual Data being this large US-based private equity-backed media localization provider, about $110 million US dollars in revenue. They bought EVA, which is based in France, with dubbing studios, accessibility services across Europe, in France, Germany, Spain, and brings 36 million US dollars in additional revenues. So as you said, I mean, this is part of a growth market, despite obviously the disruption from the Hollywood strikes in 2023, and generally quite a sizable, acquisition revenue-wise for our industry. Then we had acquisition of a similar size but very different type. We had Yonkers, the Belgian-based language service provider, being majority acquired by private equity firm Mayfair Equity Partners. Yonkers, prior to the private equity deal, was doing super well in 2022. They grew, I think, 75% organically that year, up to, again, about $35 million in revenue. So on a momentum going into that deal with Mayfair. Another deal that actually sort of flew a bit under the radar, I'd say, for most of 2023 was the acquisition of CQ Fluency, this is US-based translation provider, by Ariel Alternatives. This is an asset, some kind of financial investor, I think asset management of some description. A bit of a complicated one, but essentially Ariel Alternatives announced in a press release in November 2023 that it had acquired CQ Fluency, and they said it was to complement a prior acquisition they had made of Sorensen. Sorensen, I think many people will be familiar with the name, but it's somewhat adjacent to the core of what we here cover at Slater. Sorensen is a communications provider for the deaf and hard of hearing. Big, especially in the US. And Sorensen, when it was acquired by Ariel itself, was valued at $1.3 billion in the deal, reportedly. So then you've got this second acquisition of CQ Fluency by the asset manager, and they said to complement that original acquisition of Sorensen. But yeah, quite a sizable LSP, CQ Fluency in and of its own right.
And then there was something in Belgium.
Yeah, a couple of interesting things had happened in Belgium in 2023. So I mentioned already Yonkers in Belgium. You had also in Belgium Elan Languages, actually being the acquirer, so acquiring 3 companies in 2023. That third acquisition they completed was of a company called AVB Vertalingen, which is an interpreting and translation provider, about 15, 16, 17 million US dollars in revenue. But obviously 3 acquisitions in 1 year, probably increasingly sizable, is really sort of bolstering Elan in terms of revenue and also presence across I think Netherlands, Belgium, a couple of other markets as well in Europe. So yeah, interesting one to watch. And then also one other we plucked out was EVS Translations that was acquired by Unbabel in early 2023. I think we covered the news in January. So Vasco Pedro was the CEO of Unbabel, was talking about how its Germany location, or the location of EVS in Germany, was strategically important for Unbabel, saying, it's going to provide strategic access to the German market and also to the broader European market. And a couple of previews as well one preview especially into 2024 was, which we covered I think late in 2023, was the upcoming acquisition of Cloudbreak.
That one's complicated.
That one's complicated and it's big. But we'll provide follow-up when it closes.
I think there was some major financial issues, and they're kind of breaking that portion out of the parent company.
UpHealth, yeah.
Yeah, UpHealth. This was initially a SPAC. There's these kind of special acquisition vehicles that listed back in 2021 like crazy, and I think they ran into some financial issues. All right, let's close on leadership change at Argos Multilingual. New CEO, new COO.
Yep. All change at the helm of Argos. The new CEO is Alexander Uchinowski. He is the former COO, and he takes over as CEO from Veronique Ozkaya, the outgoing CEO. She joined Argos after selling her previous company number of years ago. And Alexander, the new CEO, he also joined Argos from that previous company as well, from Explanation, which was acquired by LanguageWire, joining Argos back in 2020. And then on the COO front, so as Alexander steps up to CEO, leaves a COO space, And Joanna Weitz is being promoted into that role of COO. Joanna has spent nearly 2 decades at Argos, so some serious loyalty there, rising through the ranks, sort of project management, ops director, and now promotion to COO. So congrats to both of them and good luck.
PM, huh? PM is the career, a good place to start a career at an LSP in project management. We had Nick from ULG on the podcast. He started as a PM and now he's the CEO of like a $90 million company.
I wonder how many of those go through sales though. Is it the CEO role?
Yeah, CEO role, you probably have to have some sales exposure, but now here Joanna, PM, ops, now COO. Well, congrats to Joanna and Alexander, and we'll spin up another pod before the end of the month. But first, there's a couple more guest podcasts. All right. Again, have a good start to the year and see you at one of the briefings or at one of the SlaterCon remotes. Cheers.